Welcome to the Sales Leader Roundtable, a show where we explore, share, and learn about trends in leadership and sales acumen. A place that provides our audience valuable insights, advice, and best practices from trusted members of the sales leadership community. Now, let's welcome KENDLEY Davenport and Jim DIEBOLD to this episode of the Sales Leader Roundtable.
Here we go again, Jim.
Always exciting, KENDLEY. Always exciting.
Well, let's welcome our audience to the Sales Leader Roundtable TV and radio broadcast. You know, we're so appreciative of Dr. Jacqueline and the USA Global TV for trusting us with this important time slot. We always like to give them the credit because we're having so much fun on their streaming network. But what is the Sales Leader Roundtable all about? You know, Jim, our show, we explore topics in leadership and sales acumen with some of the leading thought leaders in this space. Our goal is to bring you actionable and practical information that allows you to immediately grow your teams or your leadership skill set. As we said in our intro, I'm KENDLEY Davenport, your co-host, and I get to work alongside Jim DIEBOLD. Hello, Jim.
KENDLEY, how are you doing today?
I am fantastic. I'm so excited about this week's guest because we had the chance back at our April Sales Leader Roundtable to have our guests come talk to us. And boy, was it an engaging conversation. We just ran out of time. Everybody was so engaged in learning about this whole topic of sales enablement.
I got a ton of notes, and I'm excited to hear as much of it again as I can possibly get.
I got you, and I'm so appreciative of you coming back. Jim, why don't you go ahead and take a minute and introduce our guest so we can bring him to the show and get right to the topic.
Love to. Thanks, KENDLEY. So this month we have Bryan Miller with us, and Bryan is a recognized leading global expert in sales transformation with over 18 years of experience, primarily working with high growth companies in the technology, professional services, and AdTech industries. His work has been cited in the Challenger Sale, and he regularly publishes articles and is a keynote speaker at many conference events. As a sales enablement leader, Bryan's focus has been on advancing and enabling teams, taking a data-driven approach to solving complex problems, and developing people. He's a strong collaborator and business partner who understands how sales leaders think and uses this knowledge to create alignment, build trust, and establish close business partnerships with internal stakeholders. Bryan has been a senior leader in some well-known companies such as Red Bear, which is the negotiation training company, to Korn Ferry, which he handled their sales practice, Busy Labs, the Start Monday platform, and Apple, yes, that one, and is now currently the general managers for sales training at the Trade Desk. So everyone, let's welcome Bryan Miller.
Hey, thanks, guys. Appreciate that warm welcome. Great to be here today.
Man, we're
Absolutely.
So glad to have you, Bryan. Well, I have to say, Bryan, we go back a long way. I think Jim's getting tired of this story because we've had a number of guests that I have dug out of my career. Boy, I just love the many things that you've been successful at in helping some of the leading companies in America really think strategically about sales growth, having been a chief revenue officer on some startup platforms that are very popular today, as well as all types of companies. I know that we got to know each other back when you were with Red Bear. I worked for a major company that thought negotiation was a highly important skill to train all of our teams on. So we just go back a long way. And now, wow, in the last few years, your work with Apple and sales enablement, and now the Trade Desk is really extraordinary. We're so grateful you're here with us today.
Well, my pleasure, KENDLEY, and it's great to cross paths again. You know, as you said, we've had a long history together, and back in my early days, before sales enablement was even a thing, we were kind of working on this topic together, helping your teams build their negotiation capabilities. And so it's, again, wonderful to be here to talk about this topic with the two of you and hopefully share some good insights with your audience.
Appreciate that a lot. Well, Jim, you want to get us started? Let's jump into this topic.
Absolutely, KENDLEY. So, Bryan, you did a great job giving us the overall information about sales enablement last time. So for this audience as well, I think it makes a ton of sense to kind of jump in as to what sales enablement is and is not. So if you would, when you think of defining sales enablement, what comes to mind?
Yeah, thanks for starting us off there, Jim. I think it's an important question because sales enablement is a pretty new field relative to some of the other functions that exist today in big corporations and small ones for that matter. And so it's still, I'd say, in some ways finding its way and really defining itself as we go. But in this fast-paced world, I think if you ask 10 different people, what does sales enablement mean to you, or what is sales enablement, they're going to give you 10 different definitions, and they're all going to be pretty close and more or less follow the way I like to think about it, which is pretty straightforward. So for me, at least, sales enablement is really just that process of providing the skills and providing the sales organization with what they need to sell more effectively. And typically, this will fall into 4 buckets. So skills being one of the most obvious ones, right? Secondly, tools, technology tends to come to mind there. Knowledge, whether it be industry knowledge, customer knowledge, or company knowledge. And finally, content, the presentations and, one-pagers and things like that. But here's the thing. The fact is, sales enablement is, as I said earlier, a relatively new functional area for most companies, and really only come onto the scene as a formal operation or formal function, let's say, in the last 5 or 6 years. And this means that a lot of organizations view sales enablement differently, and the function can even vary from organization to organization in terms of what sales enablement actually looks after. So I like to keep it very simple, but generally it falls again into those 4 buckets.
I love that answer, Brian. It's interesting. Even from the first time to listening and thinking back now with what you just shared, I think I come from slightly old school where it was marketing did some stuff and sales did some stuff. And salespeople were just kind of like set free, have at it, good luck. And we'll talk about it on Friday in the sales meeting.
Yeah, it is interesting. I kind of use this expression I used when we talked about this previously. I think of sales enablement really as sort of a connective tissue that binds together many different functions, whether it's commercial activation, product marketing, sales training, revenue operations. Sales enablement tends to be sort of that connective tissue that brings all those groups together in different ways to help support and serve the sales organization. So hearing you say that is not surprising at all.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for that clarification.
It's funny, Bryan, you talk about these 4 buckets, and to me, it seems obvious as the social media world has taken over in the last, 10 years, where content's become king, right? We got to have all this constant delivery of content in different ways. But I think the other bucket of data is one of the ones that is one that I think sales enablement is really starting to use differently, because it used to be, as Jim said, marketing would just provide sales with a little bit of data and they would go about it. But man, with the right tools and the right processes, you can really zero in on your ideal customer and really make it a customized experience for the customer based on this data. Tell me about how that's connecting this stuff together.
Yeah, well, the old expression, or maybe it's not that old, but data is king, right? And, more and more organizations today look to make data-driven decisions about, who they target in terms of their audiences, the numbers that drive sales performance and so forth. And with the proliferation of so many different sales tools, we as salespeople, and then certainly as sales enablers as well, have insight into our performance in ways we've never had before. So, many of the tools, whether it's something like Outreach.io or, of course, the old standby Salesforce, they provide us, if used properly, and I'll put that little asterisk out there, if they are used properly, they can give us an immense insight into how I, as an individual, am performing, how my team is performing, how regions performing, and so forth. And so not only can we get that macro, top of funnel kind of data, which we've all gotten used to, but we can get down to specific behaviors like, how many appointments is Bryan setting? How many dials on the phone is he making? How many sales calls are resulting in next steps and things like that? And, if you're a coach or a manager in sales, using this data to inform the way you coach your people is monumentally improve the way that we can direct our coaching. Not only that, from a sales enablement standpoint, when we look at gaps and where we want to fill or provide capability, We use data like never before to figure out, where our team's best performing, to not only look at best practices, but also obviously to look at gaps and to use both sides of that data coin to really drive what we do here in sales enablement. So Kendley, you're absolutely right. Data is everywhere. It's used in ways that we could have never imagined 10 years ago, maybe. And it's at the heart of everything that, from a sales enablement standpoint, I do. And I know from our sales leadership standpoint, same holds true.
No, that's amazing. Go ahead, Kenley.
My true love is being a sales leader. And I think you said something that really resonated for me there is that, it used to be, Jim was talking about old school. Back in the day, it seemed like we just sort of gave everybody the same training, right? And hope for the best. But really how it's become is it's very individualized and everybody's different and everybody needs different coaching and different processes. And the data helps us do that. So if I know down in the data where this person lies, then I come across more authentic with them as well as I really help them, and they don't see it as me just beating them up over something, but really I'm helping them be more successful. I just love how we can really fine tune that in today's world.
Yeah, the data makes us more objective versus subjective when it comes to things like coaching. There's no arguing with numbers, right? So if I've got to have that conversation with a salesperson on my team to help them, maybe course correct or whatever, having that data to say exactly what they need, to show them what they need to do and why is paramount in terms of having effective coaching conversations and then making big decisions from a strategy standpoint, using that data to say, okay, where are we strong? Where do we stand the best chances of success and things like that?
I was going to sum it up and say that, if professional athletes are going to monetize data, we should too. Why not?
100%.
So, Bryan, we've used the term sales quite a bit already in this conversation between sales enablement, the name of the product, right? Our practice, I should say, sales leadership, sales training. So it just seems like this would be the target audience would be the sales team. But I get a feeling that that's not quite the case all the time. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, Jim, it's true. I think initially by name, sales enablement, you would assume that the focus is the sales team. And that certainly is a primary audience and target for folks like myself in terms of who we support. But, as is the case in the world, things constantly change. And with that come new opportunities. And if you talk to most sales enablement leaders today, they will tell you that their mandate is expanding well beyond just traditional field sales teams. So many are seeing a shift towards an expanded role that's not only covering that field sales group or the account management team or strategic accounts and the like, but they're now also focusing on other roles like customer success or pre-sales. Even marketing, channels, and probably one of my favorites and one of the newest areas is something that you hear more and more about, buyer enablement. So, Jim, as a result, one of the other big trends that you see is that in order to support this expanded mandate, the size of sales enablement teams is also growing considerably.
So, Bryan, that's awesome information. Something that just ran through my mind while you were describing that, going back to the old days comment I made earlier, was we operated in silos. Marketing did their thing, production team did theirs, and then they would tell the sales team to go sell something that they probably didn't even have ready, by the way. And a lot of frustration would happen, and then the sales would complain this way, marketing would complain that way, and it was always a challenge. With what I heard you just describe, it really sounds like it's more of a transparent team effort bringing everybody together. Is that a fair assessment?
Absolutely. And I would even go a little bit further. I would say that, when you're hiring sales enablement people, if you're in that role and you have the opportunity to do that, I think one of the big skills that separates really good enablers from others is collaboration. Being able to cross functional lines, to be able to have meaningful business conversations with marketing, with product development, with whomever it might be. And then to be able to have the, acumen to translate that back into, what you as a sales enablement leader or professional do. and help the sales team digest all this stuff that's coming at them, I think it is really a key skill area that really high performing sales enablement teams possess. And so, yeah, the lines are blurred. And if you're going to be successful in this space, I think, again, just to reiterate, collaboration, obviously communication is important. And again, going back to my point about enablement being sort of that connective tissue, really lends itself to, the ability of people having to have these skills and these capabilities to be successful.
Love it. That's awesome.
Well, it seems one of the things that I've noticed in working with lots of clients, and I think Jim is seeing this as well, and you've probably been seeing it in all the work that you've been doing, Bryan, and maybe you can talk to this, but, with social media, with the COVID experience we've all gone through in terms of how you connect with people differently than you would in the past. People aren't always in their offices. You can't call the office number and find anyone anymore. All of these dynamics have somewhat shifted and changed. And so nurturing customers has become paramount. And when I say nurturing customers, they're not customers yet. They're prospects. They're people who might have an interest in your product in the future. And I think that the world has changed a bit. We used to nurture a small number of them, and what I always laugh about the old days. But now, if you have people that have interacted with your service or product in some way, whether it be social media, or whether it be through email, however it happened, nurturing them is important. And I think this sales enablement's really helped companies get how to figure out the different ways to nurture people. How would you talk to us about that? How can people out there learn from this discussion about how they can make their organization stronger in this area?
Yeah, so I have a little bit of a very unique viewpoint on this whole thing, KENDLEY. Gartner did a piece not too long ago about talking about how the role of the salesperson is really changing, and that sales, classic sales as we know it, is sort of evolving into this idea of buyer enablement. And the role of the buyer is changing. So I'm going to go out on a little bit of a dissertation. I'll keep this brief, but just hang in there with me for a second. So, one thing that's true is that, you talk about social media, you talk about information and things like that. Buyers have access, as we all know, to a wealth of information that we as, organizations putting goods and services out there have made available. And so, there's different stats out there that range anywhere from 50 to, let's say, 75%, where, they say that the seller or the buyers out there are 50 to 75% down the road in their buying journey before they even talk to a seller. So what does that mean, in terms of nurturing leads and things like that? Well, it means that, you as a seller are meeting that customer at a different place than you would, say, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, where you were that conduit of information, right? So now it's incumbent upon the seller to do more due diligence to understand where is that buyer at in their buying journey, and to help them make sense of the information they have, right? And what it all means to them as a buyer of the particular goods or service. So, where this comes back to your question, in this idea of nurturing leads is, number one, you need to be sensitive about the kind of lead you're getting as a seller. What stage of the buying cycle are they at? You also have to be conscious of all the things that have taken place prior to that. Somebody recognized a problem. They probably went on, talked to their colleagues to find out who else has experienced that problem. Has anybody figured out a solution to that problem yet? Then maybe they start forming an internal team. Maybe they start doing research online. Maybe they issue an RFP or what have you. You could be meeting a customer at all different stages of what we would call a lead. And so from a sales perspective as a seller, you need to be thinking about this when you engage with that customer. From an enablement standpoint, it means it's a whole new different set of skills that sellers need. Yeah, some of them are transferable, obviously, but the idea of thinking about it, in the context of where that seller is at versus what I want you to do, I want you to follow my sales process, that notion has pretty much gone out the window. Now it's how do we, follow the buyer's process and bring value by doing so.
So, Bryan, I have a question for you in that respect, because, again, I love every answer you get. My brain is just turning through all of these scenarios. And So really what I'm hearing is we have a group of people, or at least a person, depending on the size and needs of the organization, that is really being that, and I love the descriptor, by the way, or the analogy of the connective tissue, but someone who is owning, learning some of those components that you just shared, for example. And Kenley brought up a great point. Ever since COVID, if things have changed at any point in time in history, recently is certainly one of those times. And meeting the buyer where they're at is very different looking than it was, say, over 3 years ago. So just if you could maybe give us a quick highlight, just to make sure I'm understanding this correctly. I am newly hired sales enablement person, and I'm going to collaborate between marketing and sales and a couple other of the silos within the company. Am I the one that's doing that research to find out where that customer is and then subsequently helping create that sales collateral to enable, we'll say, the sales team to do the proper type of presentation?
Well, Jim, as you might imagine, it's not a linear answer.
Okay.
Going back to our conversation about data earlier, we've got data coming from us, coming at us from all different places. Sometimes the seller's coming in and finding out, hey, we've got these customers who are at this stage of buying, and they're trying to figure X, Y, and Z out. And so the seller comes into the organization and brings this to our attention. Usually, this is how it plays out. I was out at a customer the other day. They were talking about this. I wanted to be able to show them how we could help them. I didn't have anything that would represent that. Can you guys help me put something together? So then enablement might reach out to marketing and say, hey, we're hearing over and over again that more and more customers are experiencing this or at this stage. So we need to think about putting something together for them. So that's part of it. The other part of it might be, my team saying, okay, well, let's talk about what you need to be asking and finding out. What kind of discovery do you need to be doing if a customer is at that stage? So it's not a one size fits all kind of solution. It's probably not the best analogy, but it's not coming from one place. It's coming from multiple places. Maybe we're finding out about new product opportunities, so we need to loop in product development. Maybe we're finding out that there's a new application for what we sell, and we're hearing it more and more from customers. So we want to go to marketing and have them put together a piece on that. So it can come from a lot of different places, Jim. And I wouldn't say it falls squarely on any one team's lap to do this. I think, again, using that whole idea of connective tissue, it's got to, information's got to flow multi-directionally. And, sometimes sales enablement happens to be the catch-all for that information. Sometimes it's not. But, in a well-structured organization where there's good communication and good information flow, the information does get to the right places through multiple channels. Did I answer your question? Or
Yeah, no, that was great. I love it.
Great.
Yeah,
Bryan,
perfect.
you said something else about this discussion about buyer enablement, and it made me think of, we're used to what I just call the classic sales funnel. You have the top of the funnel and it flows down, and you have a bunch of different stages that we all have different names for, but they're essentially the same. But it seems to me that what is really changing and how buyer enablement's really, or sales enablement's really helping things is, to me, there's no longer a classic funnel. It's like 8 mini funnels. It depends on who you are, what your persona is, and what your need is compared to where you are in your buying cycle versus the selling cycle. And we then, as salespeople, have to adjust to all that. And I do think the organizations that are better at doing this, doesn't mean they're top notch, but they're just better than their competition. They sell more. And it really doesn't matter if their product is better or worse. It's just their sales process gets a customer to flow through to the yes because they're in the right cycle, so to speak.
Yeah, I would agree with a lot of what you said there. I think the classic funnel looks a little bit different now than it did before. I wouldn't say it's completely gone out the window, but I think what's really changing is an awareness of what's happening at the top of or even before a client actually enters into that funnel officially. So, again, going back to my earlier point, we as sellers need to have a greater awareness for what customers may be learning ahead of time and helping them understand that again, it's not my term. This is something, again, that came from Gartner I just happened to subscribe to. helping them make sense of what they've got in front of them and helping them to prioritize needs and to build consensus even within their own organization. Sometimes, I see this more and more today, that the seller is actually sort of a internal client advocate in a way. And what I mean by that is a lot of times, the seller's job is to help that client, that buyer, that individual, that champion, or whoever it is, help their organization make the right decisions. So, that's educating the client on the best way to buy, the way to be thinking about the problem they're trying to solve, to bring in new perspectives like a challenger would, and so forth. And so I think it's this whole idea of not just knowing what to do when you're formally in that funnel. That's, I think, pretty consistent mostly, but having this deeper awareness of all the stuff that's really happening before, that prospect enters that funnel officially, and being aware of it.
Awesome. So, Bryan, I want to change focus for a second and talk a little more on context. So what do you see as some of the key business drivers for sales enablement function today?
Yeah, I love the question, Jim, because if you ask me tomorrow, it might change given the pace of change of business, but I'll answer it for the moment anyway. I would say really there are three pretty consistent business drivers that I see, at least across the board in places I work. The first of them obviously is not going to come as a big surprise. It's competition, right? We've got new competitors entering the market. We've got larger competitors that are being created through acquisition and consolidation. We get new sources of competition from offshore and so on. So the short version is that rapid pace of change in the business landscape has really intensified competition in many markets, probably all markets really, and resulted in an increased focus on the buyer experience to stay ahead of competitors. That's the first thing. The second thing, again, probably isn't going to be a big surprise for many of you on this watching this, but talent, and specifically hiring and retaining great talent, is another business driver. For example, factors such as increased burnout and demands for workplace flexibility, especially in light of work from home and COVID, have really led to difficulties in developing top talent and retaining reps at many organizations. So with that, enablement is really being tasked with helping to find ways to improve the work experience for sellers in order to drive retention and to make employers more desirable to want to come and work for. And then finally, and again, probably is no surprise to those of you watching, and we've already talked on this quite a bit, but that whole customer experience, customer retention, is another key driver for sales enablement. We're being tasked with helping sellers to create frictionless buying experiences and to act as that buyer enabler that I mentioned earlier, and really ensure customer satisfaction throughout the entire cycle. It's become what I call a central focus area for sales enablement. And I would say, if you were to ask me what percentage of my work is really spent between these three, I'd say it's probably the exact reverse of what I said. The majority of time is really focused on helping create that frictionless buyer experience and equipping our sellers to do that. Next is creating a great place to work, a great flexible work environment. And then lastly, it's figuring out how to differentiate and sell value and create that differentiation.
I'm sure that everyone watching or that will watch is all over the number 2 answer you gave in respect to hiring and retaining talent. Goodness, that seems to be like the golden phrase of the century right now, for sure.
It is, and from an enablement perspective, the way that plays out is onboarding, new hire onboarding. I would say that if you look at job boards for sales enablement and you read job descriptions today, probably the first or second line will say building new hire onboarding experience. Organizations are really savvy now and thinking about that experience from the second somebody signs that agreement to come and work for them to the time they leave. And that all really starts with that onboarding experience and how we equip our sellers for success from the very first day they set foot. And onboarding used to look, Jim, like here's your laptop, here's your password, here are your benefits and stuff like that. And it still includes that, clearly. But today, onboarding is hearing from leaders talk about strategic direction. It's hearing from high-performing colleagues talking about what's brought success to them. It's how do we contract? It's a world of things that personally, when I started in sales, I was never exposed to it. I figured it out on the job, like most of you probably did. And,
Yep.
we learned along the way. But today it's very structured, very formalized, and it's got to be a great experience. It's not just an information dump, but, people want a warm, welcoming experience. And, I spent my first year at Trade Desk really just focused on this one topic of building that warm, welcoming experience that really excites people to want to be working here, and to get people, what they need to be successful as quickly as they can.
It's huge.
It's funny you bring this up, because when you were talking about the 3 reasons, and then you reversed them when you said how you actually are working, what really resonated with me, and I think we all believe in this talent piece very heavily, but really it's that customer retention piece you said at the end. It's the experience the customer has, the buyer experience. And so I really think if there's one thing in sales society today that's changed, is that we now base our decisions on that experience a lot more than we think that we used to. And now it's driving everything that we do.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we used to talk about, I remember, Kenley, back in the days you and I were working together as a client and as a consultant, we used to talk about, owning the sales process as a seller, that, your job was to control the sales process, right? And I would say we still want to do that, but in a very different way than what that used to look like. And, today it's really about, it's about educating the customer. It's about, helping them make smart decisions, helping them to buy, right? Helping them buy in a way that makes it a good experience. It's no longer us saying, there's one way you buy from us, and I'm going to show you that way, and these are the 5 or 6 or 7 steps we're going to follow to get there, and that's interesting. It gets back to hiring in a way, because it really dictates this need for agility and flexibility amongst sellers to be able to pivot from maybe how they saw the sale playing out to the way it needs to play out to win. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying we give in to our customers, regardless of what they ask for. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is we need to be more aware of, where the customer's at and what we need to do in that moment to help them in order to get them across that finish line. And it's not always what we want or what our sales process and Salesforce tells us is the next step here necessarily. Sometimes it's a step A, a step B, and so forth.
Excellent. So Bryan, just real quick, I have one more question for you as we're getting close to the end of the show here, but what should chief revenue officers look for their sales enablement teams to be focused on?
Yeah, I think that it's pretty clear. And, for me, it comes down to probably 4 things right now that I would direct, if I were a CRO, and I've been in that role, if I were leading, had a sales enablement team supporting my sales team, there are probably these 4 things that I would ask them to really focus on and really marry up very closely. So number 1, deal win rates, right? What do I mean by that? Well, from an enablement perspective, I want you to be arming sellers with the knowledge and skills they need to effectively resonate with buyers and close more deals. And enablement can definitely help the organization drive more revenue and win consistently by doing so. The second thing, which is an outshoot of win rates, is obviously revenue growth, right? And, as I've been saying all along, and you guys will probably get tired of hearing this expression, but think of sales enablement as that connective tissue. Really think about it. And think about it as that tissue that spans across revenue teams. And as such, the function is really well positioned to help you drive commercial growth by, bringing together the right teams at the right time and accelerating response rates and things like that. Thirdly, which I think is a central focus and will always be for enablement, not surprising, rep performance, right? Organizations need sellers who can consistently and repeatedly hit their goals, as well as be coached to achieve new goals. And having that consistent performance relies on hiring proficient talent that can quickly start driving results while retaining that existing talent, like we were just talking about. As I alluded to, one big component of that is the onboarding experience. So having enablement build and deliver an effective onboarding training and experience that gets reps up to speed quicker will have a huge impact on that rep performance. And then finally, what we've been talking about quite a bit here is that customer experience. So many teams are prioritizing customer experience as a key enablement goal. and reinforcing the importance of delivering meaningful value from the very first interaction throughout that entire buyer journey, right? So by Enablement supplying sellers with relevant content and showing them how to use it effectively, we can help reps provide immediate value to buyers and help solve their problems. So that's really, those are the 4 or so key things that I see really being the drivers and the key focus areas for enablement. And, I think they're all big asks and they take a lot of time and effort. But these are, by far the 3 big buckets I would say we ought to be focusing on.
Love it. Thank you.
Bryan, you couldn't have summed that up better in overall this whole conversation we've had today in those closing 4 big key areas to focus on with sales enablement. I just think that's a big golden nugget that people can take away from this conversation today. Bryan, thank you so much for being a part of our show. Again, we got into a lot more detail at our Sales Leader Roundtable last month. Our members did with you, and now thanks for joining us here on me and Jim streaming TV show and radio podcast that we now can tell more of the world about some of the work that you're doing. Maybe in closing, Bryan, tell us a little bit about the trade desk. I think a lot of people would like to know a little bit about that. Let's make sure we give credit to your employer who's allowing you to be with us today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. So Trade Desk is one of the leading ad tech companies out there. We enable advertisers to buy media in what we call a programmatic way, which means that they leverage data and make data-driven decisions to target audiences with efficiency and effectively. We helped, inventory holders, the people who have places for advertisers to post their content. We help bring those 2 groups together. And really, we focus on the buy side, though. So we're really helping those people who are buying media to do so with speed, efficiency, and really make informed decisions to maximize their advertising spend. So, and I'm really thrilled to also comment that, the Trade Desk today was, I keep mentioning Gartner. I think they need to pay me or something, but we just hit the top upper right quadrant for Gartner. So we're really proud of that, and a lot of great things coming down the pike.
Awesome.
Well, congratulations on all your success, and thank you for contributing your knowledge to our group as me and Jim are trying to give back to the world of leadership and sales acumen. Bryan, really thank you for being with us today. We appreciate you a whole lot.
Thanks, you, Bryan. Thank you, Jim. It's been my pleasure.
Yeah, great to see you again.
Well, Jim, we've got another one taped in the books now, and things are going well, and we got another one coming up in a month.
That's amazing. I got another page of notes today, just listening to Bryan, same as last time. So love these experts that we're able to bring onto the show and help everybody that's listening.
Yeah, I do as well. So for our audience listening, our next streaming TV show will be it's always the first Monday of each month at 4 p.m. Eastern time. And so our next show is June the 5th. So stay tuned, look at me and Jim's LinkedIn page and look at our promos on USA Global TV and radio, and you'll be able to see who our next guest is. We're excited about that. And Jim, until I see you at the May Roundtable, where we'll be conducting a peer growth lab, I'm excited about the continued work together.
Every time, Kenley. Thanks again. See you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody, for being with us today.
Thank you for joining us today. You are now eligible to attend the peer-to-peer professional development network of the Sales Leader Roundtable. It is held on the 4th Wednesday of each month at 12 o'clock noon Eastern Standard Time. For an invitation, email us at info@salesleaderroundtable.com or visit us at www.salesleaderroundtable.com. Our next show is scheduled for the first Monday of each month. We hope you will join us again.